she more or less said what it is that I do. I used to work at the European Parliament as an advisor dealing with LGBTQI, disability rights, women's rights, and throw in the odd xenophobia and racism from time to time. Because when you work at the European Parliament, you quickly realize that I am a minority. That minorities on every single level in our society are still having an issue with being represented. And it gives the question as to how do we define diversity? How do we define, everything that we do in our society when it comes to the ethnic minorities? Who is defining this? So I'll start with the beginning. Our common knowledge or common definition of diversity, who defines it? It's not the people that they're speaking of. So what defines diversity? And there starts my issue. When you have white people, predominantly white people, defining diversity, there begins the problems already. Because in their definition of diversity, I don't fall. Because I'm too black, I'm too loud, my hair is too curly. I don't fall into the definitions that are acceptable for white people, the majority, of what diversity is. And for me, that's very problematic. So at the European Parliament, if you know a little bit about the European Parliament, there's 751 MEPs, so representation at the European Parliament. You've got 751 MEPs, members of the European Parliament, who represent the 28, soon to be 27 countries. Of the 752 MEPs, 11 of them are of color. 11 of them are of color. And even seeing these 11 people, there's maybe 2 of them that are black. And with the UK leaving, half of them. So we have a big issue when it comes to this. But also because we have the Commission that doesn't want to put out a study for racial diversity in Europe. So you can already see that the problem exists even at the core. When you don't have an actual view of what your population looks like, then how can we go about fixing the issues that are at hand? At the European Parliament, besides the lucky 11 that are of the representation, there are very few assistants that are of color. So there's a lot of people who work in the Parliament. I think they have about 5,000 staff, and on top of that they have an extra 8,000 people that deal with just the building itself and the institution itself. And of those 8,000, we'll say a good half of them are minorities. And these are people that are in roles that people are used to seeing. They're the cooks, they're the cleaners, they're the workers, they're the people that take care of the building. These are the roles in which white people are used to seeing people of color. So sometimes I would go into a meeting or into places that predominantly aren't meant for people of color, and people would think that I was the cleaner. Even though I'm dressed like everybody else, I'm very professional. I mean, today I'm very fly, if I must say. But I was dressed very professionally, very in keeping with what they would find acceptable as a person, as a professional person, and people would just hand me their glasses. There you go, you can deal with this. Or I'd have my own office, and my name's on the door, my name's on the desk. They knock on the door, I say, come in, and then they would look at me and say, oh, is Rachael Moore here? And I'd say, let me go find her. And I'd just go on to getting my stuff, getting out of the room. I would lock the door and then walk away and go get a tea or a coffee, because that in itself is a very charged situation to be in. This is very problematic. So outside of the European Parliament, I tend to give a lot of speeches and talks on feminism and LGBTQI, because these are the communities that I feel a part of. I feel a part of the LGBTQI community. It's something that I hold dear, but it's also very problematic is that when you go into these spaces and you're expecting a level of acceptance or comprehension, is that there itself the same issues that you have in the greater community have trickled down into these smaller communities. So let's talk about feminism. feminism for me, that's why I define myself as an Afrofeminist, is because within feminism, I cannot find my place. And I will ask all the feminists here, when was the last time you went up to a woman of color or a feminist of color and asked them what are their issues concerning feminism? Because white women are all there for the, we're there for our sisters, for everybody who's a feminist, we're there, we're doing everything for you. But at the end of the day, I'm saying, but when was the last time you asked a person of color what were their needs, what were their wants, what were their issues when they woke up? Because that's what intersectionality is. It's an intersection of different oppressions. So when a woman tells me, oh, you know, I know how you feel when it comes to racism. Oh, I know how you feel because I'm a woman and I know how you feel. Or a gay person, they will come up to me and they'll say, oh, but I'm a gay man and I know how you feel when it comes to racism. I'm like, yeah, but I'm a woman and I'm gay. So how do you know how I feel when it comes to racism? Racism is something that I wake up with every day. I wake up, I get up, I put on my shield, and I walk out the house knowing that something racist will eventually happen. It'll be in the smaller things or it'll be in the larger things. When it's in the larger things, to a certain extent, I'm thankful, because at least I know straight away that this person's a racist. There's no questions, if, buts, or maybes. I don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I know that they're a racist and they're coming out for it, and I can appreciate that level of honesty. But with other people, it's in the smaller things. It'll be, ooh, oh. You can tell by the glances, the way they hold their bags, if they're close to you, if they are already looking at you. And it's very much in the stare, the way they look at you, because the stare says a lot of things. When I go to Germany or I go to Berlin, I was in Berlin for a talk, and in Berlin they like to stare. And in the staring, there's 1,001 questions that go by. And it'll go from, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I wasn't expecting you here. Oh, but why are you here? What are you doing here? Give me a reason as to why you're here. Tell me I shouldn't be scared of you. Hello? Still waiting for my answers. Why are you here? And the stare will go on. So now I've just gotten into the habit of just staring back. I stare back at them. I'll bring it down back to racism. Racism for me is something that I live with every day. And it also boils down to the level of definitions, or the definitions that we deal with, the definitions that we play with all day. What is diversity? Because when you look at diversity, when you see it displayed, be it through campaigns, given out from certain institutions, these institutions are saying, this type of diversity we want, and nothing else. It's a bit like the brown paper bag test. I don't know if you know the brown paper bag test. So in the United States, to get into certain clubs, they'd have a brown paper bag. And if your skin color was darker than this brown paper bag, then you weren't getting in the club. Yet again, this diversity, this level of colorism to a certain extent is defined by whiteness. Whiteness has defined everything that we're doing. So therefore, when I see feminism or white feminism, for me that is just white supremacy if there's no intersectionality. If that feminism has not taken on the ideals, the wants, the needs of black people, of trans women, of all different types of women, because they're all here, of older women, of religious people, if they haven't taken on that level of intersectionality, then it's just white supremacy at the end of the day. So that's what I'll be talking about later. And I had other things to say. I'll just close on one thing. I mean, I know a lot of people stand for Beyonce, and well, my Beyonce is Audre Lorde. I don't know if you know of Audre Lorde, but I'm going to close it with a passage from her book, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. Here we go. After I read from my work entitled A Poem for Women in a Rage, a white woman asks me, are you going to do anything with how we can deal directly with our anger? I feel it's so important. I ask, how do you use your rage? And then I have to turn away from the blank look in her eyes before she can invite me to participate in her own annihilation. I do not exist to feel her anger for her. I don't exist to make you feel comfortable. I don't exist to water things down for you. I don't exist to make it easy for you because it's not my job. My job is to uplift the people of my community, be they black, gay, whatever have you, crazy. I'm here for those people. But if you're white, you have a lot of work to do because we've been at the table for a long time. Gay people have been at the table for a long time. People of color have been at the table for a long time. We've written so much. We've left the conversation open for so long. And now it's up to you guys to do something about it. Racism was built by you. It's time for you to dismantle it.